Thank you for being here. I'm Diego Espíritu. I'm going to talk today a little bit typewriters and typewriter art. This is the fourth activity of the series Echoes that, well, you can see in the desk. We've been having a series of activities, workshops, talks. This is the second talk, fourth activity overall, and we're still going to have 2 workshops on typewriter art. And we are really happy because we've been having so much fun learning, relearning, and making ourselves questions towards what is literature and what is poetry, what is visual art, or what someone calls it textual art. So last time we talked about visual poetry in general. What was that? What was visual poetry? It was really interesting to see how visual poetry is this thing that you cannot detach from reality. Figures, letters, characters, text, all this comes together to explain a reality, context, which is really, really interesting to see, because often I get the idea that visual poetry is taught as this isolated type of discipline of poetry, which is not. You need to place visual poetry in its place. And typewriter art, it's not only, I wouldn't say it's a branch of visual poetry, but definitely it's a zone of it. It's an area of it. So, well, this is gonna be the topic of today. But before I start, I wanna thank to Mary Gordon, to Anna Wigger, to Eric Hawk, the UB Galleries team, and also Paul Calandra, that it's helping us with video and helped us also with the first video. That's amazing. Thank you. And Bob Escalisi. It's a whole team that is making all this possible. Thank you for that. So what I want to provoke today is an aesthetic unsettlement, a little bit, to provoke some questions. Just as visual poetry, it's not like probably it's not like a normal way to land on textual art and literature. Here, at the same with typewriter art, it's also an unsettlement of what is this? What am I seeing? It's the same unsettlement when you are typing in the typewriter and you haven't ever touched a typewriter. And that moment of unsettlement, when you see the people, when you see the students, and when you see creators embracing the new form of the poem with the typewriter, it's really interesting. So that moment of unsettlement with the machine, I want to recreate that today with the questions that I want to give to you. So in the first moment for typewriter art, just as visual poetry, typewriter art has many types of registers, zones. To say typewriter art is to say many things at the same time. And I'm gonna try to nuance a little bit from my perspective what these zones of the typewriter art are. So for instance, I'm gonna say that typewriter art is a field in which language becomes something placed, distributed, repeated, delayed, and materially tested on the page as a space. So first concept here, important, space. Then, second concept, important, the machine. Okay? So we have a thing, that is a canvas, that is a space, and we have also the machine. And we're gonna go deeper and deeper into this interplay, into this crossroads. That's the first figure of thought that I wanna give you to start thinking on these questions. The space and the machine. Intention, okay? The typewriter art appears when the machine stops to be only transparent vehicle for transmitting language and becomes instead a visible instrument of composition. So what happens when you put the machine in tension with the space? The typewriter, as a machine, stops being a machine that can communicate in a traditional way. And instead, it's gonna occupy the space in a way different form. So that's the first outcome of putting these two things in tension. For me, before going deeper into this definition, it's important to make a huge nuance of what is not typewriter art for me, or at least in the terms I wanna give you today, what typewriter art is or what is not. In this amazing book of Bob Neal, Typewriter Art with a Special Computer Program, Bob Neal, what he does is this amazing exercise of score the letters. So if you can see this on Monoscope, it's there free, you can download it. And it's really amazing how he gives like a anthology, a collection of scores to make your own images, okay? Like type your own Prince Charles, and also he has like these landscapes. And then what is really interesting and what really it's appealing to me is how Bob Neal's proposes this way of writing and composing the figures. It's literally a score, but to create visual compositions, right? So in the first row, you're gonna type 91 add. In the second row, you're gonna type 91 add. And then jump into the 7, you're gonna type 18 add. And then 7A means it's gonna be over typing on the other 7 row. And then on the 7B, it's another row on top of the row. So by doing this, he's giving you a score to create images, lifelike images. This is important, the lifelike images that he is proposing in this book. And that for me, I really like the way Bob Neal delivered this, because it's a method of creating typewriter art. But for me, the tension between the space and the machine is not as, cannot be grasped fully when making or creating lifelike visual compositions. Not that it's not hard, it's really hard. Technically, it's really hard to create something like this. In fact, if you go into social media and you look into hashtag typewriter art, the first visual compositions that you're gonna find is probably this. There are influencers now creating on the streets like these beautiful landscapes or beautiful portraits using this type of approach to typewriter art. But this is the nuance that I was referring to. I don't think this problematizes in a way that I want you, the form, the space, and the machine, and the question that I want to give you. So, what is not typewriter art? Let's say in this first nuance, it's a representational approach. For me, for us today, typewriter art is not or does not try to create lifelike visual compositions. First note on our definitions, okay? So I'm gonna steal a list I'm gonna borrow a list for the beginning of this question, this argument of Jim Andrews, a computer artist. He says, and I'm gonna read this. I said that it's programmability, not interactivity or anything else that is a crucial matter to consider in computer art. What makes computer art computer art? We've seen that there is a great deal of art that appears on computers that could as well appear on a page or on a TV in a Canva or in an album. I'm calling that art digital art, and computers are not crucial to the displays of appreciation of it. And he goes on by saying, however, as I pointed out, there are types of computer art that are not interactive at all. Generative computer art is often not interactive. It's often different each time you see it. The art is generated by a computer program. This sort of work needs to be considered as computer art because the art requires a computer to be generated at all. So if interactivity is not sufficient to characterize the special properties of computer art, what is? Programmability is what separates computers from other types of machines. So this structure of the argument of Jim Andrews is what I like and I borrow to start my own thinking of typewriter art beyond the nuance, beyond the representational nuance that I just did. So once we put that away, the question is, what makes typewriter art be typewriter art and not something else? Of course, the first answer is easy, because we can say typewriter art is typewriter art because it's made with typewriters, right? But that's not enough. That's not enough. Definitely it's not enough. This here, to start going into this tension between the space and the machine, what is legible and what is not legible. This Pitman's Typewriter Manual from 1893, you can see here that even though this is a manual for learning how to type on typewriters, on this manual you can start seeing just lifelike representations of things, spaces and figures, but something else also. This is an formal abstraction already. You can see here, right? I mean, you have this sort of a proto-emoji there done by the machine, but also you have these figures that is not lifelike at all, but it's making something different from the original purpose of the typewriter. Later on in the Strand magazine on England on March 1909, we can see more proto-emojis. Here we can read like the typewritten portrait reproduced in the December number suggests that the compositor, with the aid of his many type signs, is able to produce some extraordinary effects. Here are some simple but remarkable illustrations of different moods. The three examples in the upper row, being more elaborate than those in the lower, are consequently more lifelike. So this lifelikeness is slowly is depicted somehow. You cannot escape from it at the beginning of the typewriter art, as I understand it. But this abstraction, this movement from the first line to the second line, it is what it's really interesting to me. Makes me wonder if there's a rhetoric or if there is a poetic beyond the nuance of the lifelikeness that I don't wanna embrace, right? So, to answer to this question of what typewriter art is, what makes typewriter art being typewriter art and not something else, I'm gonna help myself in two important anthologies. There are many anthologies right now already, but I think two of the most important ones is this Typewriter Art by Alan Riddell, and also this addendum. It's not only an addendum, it's a book by itself, but Barrie Tullett's Typewriter Art and Modern Anthology. Both of them are really, really important because they establish beyond the representational type of typewriter art, genealogy, a history. So, for instance, Alan Riddell, this division is really important for me because he established two moments really important in the typewriter art as we are understanding it right now: the pioneers and the contemporaries. Then Barrie Tullett, in his index, of course, he is going to include the pioneers just as Riddell. And the contemporary works is going to be way bigger than the Alan Riddell ontology. But, and this is really important for me, the golden age. And I don't want, and I want you to see that equation, structure equal content. That's going to be crucial. It was crucial for visual poetry, but it's going to be crucial as well for typewriter art. So, okay. This, the cover of the anthology of Alan Riddell, it's a piece in itself. Flora Stacy is the artist. She was a quite important figure, Barrie Tullett says. She was quite an important figure in the early years of art typing. A brief article in the New York Times from 1904 shows 3 of her illustrations, a fairly complex peacock and 2 small figures. It says that Stacy is an English stenographer who some years ago seen a prize offer by a phonographic paper, entered for the competition, and has since applied herself to the idea. So we can see here from 1898, from the Phonetic Journal, this piece by Flora F. Stacy. And what it's really interesting for me here is that beyond the butterfly, the frame is what is really interesting. How? How she made that frame. Repetition, return, and error. Repetition, return, and error. So the way she framed the drawing, the image, that's the first moments of a poetics, if we can say that, of a poetics of the typewriter art like I want you to understand it. It's not imitating reality, it's adding something more to reality. How? By repeating, by making mistakes, human mistakes, which is really important, and of course, the use of a space. So, I don't want to go over all the history that Riddell and Tullett already made. You can go with your own time, on your own time, and see the books. But I do want to borrow the concept of the pioneers and the contemporaries, and specifically two artists from those anthologies. Stefi Kiesler and Werkman. But first, Stefi Kiesler. Stefi Kiesler, she was an amazing artist. She belonged to the Style collective, and she published in the Style magazine under the pseudonym of Pietro de Sacca. So she had to publish under the name of a man. These amazing visual compositions, in which if you follow like the trace of the ornamental of Flora Stacy, the frame here is no longer a frame. The repetition of Flora Stacy is no longer only a frame. The ornament becomes the center of it. In other words, the repetition of the letters, the human mistake. Here, I do this because the mistake is something positive. I mean, I'm going to go back to that later. So it's, with Stefi Kiesler, specifically, she calls these compositions typo-plastics. So her typo-plastics put in the middle of the composition what in Flora Stacy was only an ornament. And here it's a composition itself. See how neat it is, like so clean, so organized, and so conscious of the space at the same time. So I propose this tension between space and machine. And if I go further, because I don't want you to lose sight of that figure of thought, the space here now becomes the Canva, the page. And within the page, we have a content that it's somehow not legible. We don't quite understand what we are seeing, but that's okay. That's not wrong. And at the same time, we have this technical tell that it's the machine that is telling us that we couldn't understand otherwise, that we can only see this through the typewriter. So it's a tension, like the tension between the space and machine. Now it's a tension between something that is not legible and something that is legible. So this is the tension I'm talking about, that otherwise I don't think we could reach it with lifelike visual composition. If we were in a workshop, I would ask you, how do you think this piece is being made? And we can wonder how. Did Stefi Kiesler have their typewriter modified or not? It was only patience. So we can spend a good chunk of minutes trying to figure out how they did this without modifying machines. But the typo-plastic, number one, okay? Typo-plastic from Stefi Kiesler, aka Pietro Saga. They put the ornament in the center of the space, okay? Pioneers. Second, Werkman. Werkman was a Dutch painter, typographer, and self-taught artist associated with the collective The Plug, and he develops what he calls tiksels. They are different, right, from typo-plastics, from the typo-plastics of Stefi Kiesler. How are they different? For me, this is more organic. Ornament goes in the center of the space. The space becomes unstable. And now Werkman, what he does with his tiksels is printing this organic movement to the repetition. It's no longer geometric figures. He's embracing an organic type of movement. Even one can say did he make a mistake here? Is this on purpose? This is important. The error becomes part of it, okay? Here. It has its own poetics. It's dirty on purpose. More tiksels. So Werkman with his tiksels and Stefi Kiesler with the typo-poems, typo-plastic, they are the pioneers. So the tension that I proposed at the beginning, the tension between space and machine, the tension between something that is legible and something that is not legible, now has more nuances. That tension can be either organic, can be either ornamental, or can be also with Kiesler really geometrical and completely focused on the middle, really organized. So we're getting more tools to understand what we are seeing. And at the same time, we are not fully understanding what we are seeing, and that's okay. For me, and this is not chronological, they are really, really important, the Temersons. The Temersons, Francisca Temerson was a painter, illustrator, and stage designer. Stefan Temerson was a writer, poet, composer, and experimental filmmaker. What I like about them, and these are, if I'm not wrong, both in Alan Riddell and in Barrie Tullett's anthology, Barrie Tullett, definitely they are. But I have a doubt if they are in Alan Riddell. They are really important for me because here I'm breaking completely the timeline, okay? But they are really important for me as a hinge of what's coming later because for me, they open the door of typewriter art to be more than the typewriter. Without that, stop being typewriter art. Why would Barrie Tullett put this in the anthology? It's typewriter art because it's made with typewriter. But it's something else as well. Well, for me, they are a hinge because the Temersons show that we can mix techniques with typewriter and we can emulate. Typewriter art can have a resonance with other fields, with other media, and it doesn't have to stop, like it can still be typewriter art. Like it comes to my mind, like from here, Steve McCaffrey, right? Like he does this huge visual composition with different type of media. So they open that door in the typewriter art specifically. You can see here how they play with typography, collaging, repetition, drawing. So what they're saying in one word, mix is possible in typewriter art as well. And if you are truly like, if you can see the thing that I'm doing, this is not other but history of textual art in general and visual poetry. It's just, it has another nuances, has other artists, but this moments of putting this nuance here, putting this feature here, opening this, causing a crack, visual crack here and there, that's basically art history in general. So, what makes typewriter art being typewriter art? Stefi Kiesler, Werkman, and all of them, what they are doing, first, right now, the pioneers, only with the pioneers, with Kiesler and Werkman, and now the Temersons, what they are doing we can move forward in the definition of typewriter art is showing us that the machine can make the space unstable. How are they doing that? One of them by depicting organic movement, other by putting the ornaments in the middle of it. So each one of them are resignifying the space in their own terms. So all this is really important because this is the concrete turn, what comes next. And this is what Barrie Tullett calls the golden age. And remember I told you, do not forget about the equation between structure and content. Here is the important moment with structure is equal content. What does that mean? For concrete poets, structure is equal content because they stated that what they were communicating was the form and nothing else. What you are seeing, the form that you are seeing is what you get. There's nothing else. I mean, I'm oversimplifying the argument, but basically that's it. Why? Because this equation, we're aiming for a formal universality. They want it to be seen, aesthetically speaking. So structure is equal content because the message is the form, or the form is the message. There's no more to it. I believe that is more to it, but at the end with them. So specifically in the concrete turn, in the golden era, as Barrie Tullett names it, we have two. Well, we have three. I like another one a lot because he mixes techniques, but following this timeline, we have two really important, Henri Chopin and Sylvester Houédard. They're really important. They become part of this concrete turn because they develop this architectural type of approach to typewriter art. It's no longer just organical movements, it's no longer geometrical gestures, it's no longer mixed media, it's all together to display this architectural gesture of virtuosity. This is as hard as making a portrait, making a Bob Neal's portrait, or following a score of Bob Neal's. This is really hard. These are calculated figures that were done really slow by Henri Chopin. Henri Chopin, she was most known for sound art, but he did these compositions that were called dactylopoems. Dactylopoems. So we have the typo-plastics from Stefi Kiesler, then we have the tiksels from Werkman, and now we have the dactylopoems from Henri Chopin. Don Sylvester Houédard, also someone really dedicated to this. He was born in Guernsey in 1924, educated in Rome and Oxford, and later ordained as a Benedictine monk. So he was a monk doing typewriter art all day, which is, I mean, then again, if we were in a typewriter art workshop, I would ask, how do you think he was able to do something like this, right? Like, yeah, I know we are embracing human mistake here to understand the figures, but this is really something. So they were having like this echo with the concrete poets. The concrete poets, they were playing with this verbi vocal visual feature, which is visual compositions that can be read and heard. Then again, this was part of the structure is equal content, and all this together were aiming for an universalization of the form. And the third one, that is not strictly typewriter art, but I really like him because he shows what the Temersons proposed. We can do typewriter art with other media. Hansjörg Mayer, he comes from the printing culture. He is well known for many things, but for me, he's really well known for the Futura magazine, which is huge. The archive from the Futura magazine, it's amazing. And this type poems not only have a dialogue with the concrete poets, but also with the typewriter artists that we were talking about. And this is from 1965, in the middle of the typewriter concrete turn. Okay, so now we have Stefi Kiesler, typo-plastics. Then we have tiksels from Werkman. Then we have dactylopoems from Henri Chopin. And then also we have what they call, I'm forgetting what Don Sylvester Houédard called them, typestracts. Typestracts. All of this are resonating with the architectural optimism that were around the concrete poets. Let us remind that the concrete poets, consciously or non-consciously, they were really excited, is not the word, but the modernization of Brazil was truly shown in the visual poems of these poets, the Haroldo de Campos brothers, Deso Pignatari, Gomringer. All this consciously or unconsciously belong to their time. And this is when it starts to show the other element that for me problematizes the equation between structure and content, context. These are not only well-composed visual figures. These are something else. This tells something about the world they were done in. At least I believe that. Then when the context starts appearing, the equation for me, a structure equals content, becomes a little bit blurry. And it fails for me, the universalization of the equation for me fails, but the failure is not bad, it's good. Because something that is not universal is telling you something about the place. For me, when the equation between structure equals content fails because you can read the world through the form, then you can open the form to many meanings. That's a gaining, aesthetic gaining from these figures, I believe, which is more emphasized, I believe, in the contemporaries. Another category that Barrie Tullett and Alan Riddell used. Of course, I'm not gonna go through all the contemporaries, but my all-time favorites, this is one of the Alan Riddell's compositions. For number one, Bob Cobbin. Bob Cobbin, he was from England, and he was doing this type of compositions in which the noise was so heavy, and it was, I would say, organic at the same time. Born in England, Bob Cobbin became one of the central figures of British sound, visual, and concrete poetry. And through Writers' Forum, he also created an infrastructure for circulation and small press experimentation. So Bob Cobbin is one of the contemporaries. It's in between the concrete poets and the most contemporaries. But for me, one of my all-time favorites, it's Ruth Refeld. She, I believe, combined many techniques. The organical gestures of Werkman, the geometrical dimension of Stefi Kiesler, the virtuosism also of the concrete poets, or the golden era typewriter artists. So she had all that in these pieces. You have these moments of organical, like a space, but also you have these crazy moments of architectural gestures. I believe this was made with electric typewriter art. It has to be, because of the precision, some kind of modified electric typewriter. And I was lucky enough to see these pieces in person when some of the people in charge of the Museo Cabañas in Mexico found pieces of Ruth in Mexico in the mail art, due to the mail art and the correspondence with another artist, Matthias Geritz. And this is again context showing up. The reason Ruth did all this is because she embraced back then in East Germany mail art, because she couldn't do it otherwise. So she had to like sneak the works and create these works through mail art. So indirectly, the works were created or were making emphasis on the context. But what if we don't use really the repetition, the saturation, the noise? What if we go instead for something that is more minimal? Well, the definition of typewriter art then is now bigger. Because so far we've been seeing some kind of history that is in crescendo, right? From the typo-plastics to the dactylopoems, going to the tiksels, and then this big moment of the golden era. But then, as if it were like a musical piece, in Marianne Holme Hansen and other contemporaries, this big noise goes silent. And this is something really a characteristic from the contemporaries, this minimal approach of the typewriter art. What the other structures, what the other artists already said, we don't have to say it, or we don't have to say it in the same way. So erasure now becomes also a thing. Marianne Holme Hansen, one of my favorite artists, she's still alive. He is one of the clearest examples of post-concrete sensibility trained in the first Academy of Fine Art, the International Center of Photography and Goldsmith. She has pursued the ongoing project Typing, Not Writing since 2011. These pieces are somewhere in between a poem, a visual poem, concrete poem, typewriter poem. It's like, but it makes sense when you frame it in all this history that we are learning. I mean, remember the door that I opened, not me, but that I'm making emphasis on with the Temersons and Hansjörg Mayer. The Temersons, what they did is that they sort of said, we can do more than that only the typewriter, and this still will be typewriter art. And then Hansjörg Mayer, he did this type of poems. They were not made with typewriter, but they look like typewriter art. In that same way, Alyson Provax, amazing artist that I just recently knew, based in Portland, whose work moves through printmaking, basically. You can see her work in her Instagram and in her webpage. I believe it is amazing. The first time I saw this, I thought it was typewriter, but it's not. It's printmaking, and you can see the process of this in her Instagram, and it's really neat. And what you can get from this is that typewriter art, once the concrete poets or the golden era typewriter artists show all the possibilities of typewriter art in a virtuosism type of way, and now that has been shown, silence, erasure comes into play, and then maybe it's not necessary for us in this moment, right now, to say all that. Other people said it before. So that's why it's really interesting how Marianne Holme Hansen and Alyson Provax took this few pieces, but making a strong statement, I would say, visual statement. Another one, minimal, from Mexico, Jorge Méndez Blake. He was born in Guadalajara, in Mexico, my city, and trained as an architect. His work explicitly investigates the relation between literature, architecture, and visual form. Then again, there's a constant here between what's minimal and not what is saturated and repeated. Right. So, for me, as we go south and we see these visual poets, in the first lecture, I wanted to convey that visual poets in Latin America question directly or indirectly, or consciously or unconsciously, the equation of structure is equal content. Because for visual artists in Latin America, the context is so overwhelming that either they want it or not. Every time it's there, every time the social context is there. But I like that. I like the context being present in the form. So Mira Schendel, also from Brazil, she's amazing. You can see here. Mira Schendel, Swiss-born, and later major figure in Brazilian post-war art. She worked across drawing, sculpture, print, books, and fragile textual fields. The work from this that you're seeing, typewritings or dactylopoems, another name for it. Typewriter art and ink on paper. So for her, the reason I brought up the context aspect of it with her is that she spoke like 6 languages, and the way this ambiguity, and here comes the failure of the universality. You cannot state an universality when you have this ambiguity of language here. This is when the equation fails, but it's not bad that the equation fails. That's what it makes more stronger the piece, the ambiguity of it. From Spain, Elena Asins, she created these pieces that reminds me a lot of this textile type of typewriter art, is similar to what Sheila Hicks did, Joseph Albers, but Joseph Albers, he didn't do it like on textile, on fabric, but Sheila Hicks definitely. I'm not sure if Elena de Asins was trying to have a conversation with them, but these mechanogrammas, these typewriter art pieces, definitely reminds us of Sheila Hicks and textile art. So typewriter art can be also some kind of textile, which is amazing, right? And then from Chile, one of my longtime favorites, Guillermo Deisler. Guillermo Deisler, from 1944 to 1961, he studied various specialties related to arts and crafts. He also studied theater, design, and lighting at the theater school. From 1967 to 1973, he was a lecturer at the University of Chile. But after the military coup in 1973, he immigrated to Paris with his family after a few months in exile. So what I mean by context, if we go to the South or to Latin America, it's really hard not to see context. Not that it's not before. If we search and if we question also the early poems of the concrete poets and even before, we can see context there. It's there. But the form itself is so vocal that sometimes we cannot see it. But here in Deisler, it's there, right? Dictator of the people, dictator of the people, Irano del pueblo, Irano del pueblo, ira del pueblo, Irán del pueblo, anger of the people, right? Trauma, minimal, right? Amazing. So before doing this landing in the final part of the lecture, I want to say that the tension that I propose of space and machine is also a tension between what's legible and what is not legible. What is legible? The machine, the technicality. But when you put that purpose in tension with space by doing these visual compositions that are not representational, then the space becomes unstable. And then in this tension, we can see something else, we can see questions. And then again, not that it's not there before, but with poets like Daisler, with poets like Carrion, even, we can see how the context is there, and it's always been there. But for some reason, it's more present, like the materiality of the visual pieces in Latin America, it's there, it's emphasized, it's something you cannot escape. So the universality for me cannot be achieved when you close read these pieces, but that's not bad. I know I've said that a lot of times, but the fact that the structure is not equal to the content brings the context into the equation, and that ambiguity, it's even more rich. But to land this lecture, let us not forget that the typewriter art can also have humor, right? So remember the first expressions of typewriter art that were not Florestacy. Before Florestacy, we had these proto-emojis that were really like funny, lifelike type of thing. But here you can see this, the fun with your typewriter from Match Romer, how they created these pro-emojis as well. I mean, and this is really something. Kerry Riner, another artist, living artist. You can see her Instagram. She saw this book, the one that I show you, and she went into doing these pieces. And this typewriter art is alive. Typewriter art is still happening. We have many examples of it. You can go into Instagram, and if you look further, or internet, and if you look further than the representational layer of the typewriter art that is the most prominent on social media, you can find great examples of typewriter art making the space unstable. For instance, Alyson Provax, that she's making this type of sculptures with their pieces. She types so hard on the paper that the paper becomes this type of sculpture. So it's a different approach, right? She is included, I believe, in the Barrie Tullett anthology as well. And Fran Singleton, of course, if you can go and see her work in Instagram that I was just seeing, Frank, you manage different registers as well, like humor, architectural gestures. So having like conversation with different types of typewriter artists and showing that typewriter art is alive and well. And it's more than the typewriter. So what is typewriter art? What is typewriter art, and what makes typewriter art be typewriter art and not something else? I would say it's the tension between the machine and the space, and in that tension causes this unsettlement, like aesthetic unsettlement that I don't know what am I seeing here, but it's something that I cannot fully read. So this legibility that finds a non-legible aspect of it, and then if you place it in context, then you have questions. You can question a space, context, and form, and therefore typewriter art is another way of making questions. Thank you very much.